Disclaimer. Before we begin, please know this story is purely fictional. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is a coincidence. Viewer discretion is advised. Have you ever wondered if there was a life you were meant to live? A life that slipped through your fingers, one simple choice or moment that changed everything. This is the story of Jack, a man who wasn't supposed to ask that question, because when he did, he found the answer, and it cost him everything. Jack lived a simple, steady life. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. He had a job, an apartment, and a routine. Most days he'd wake up, work, come home, eat, and sleep. He had friends once, a lover he thought he'd marry, dreams he'd imagined for himself. But somewhere along the way, life had shifted, and he'd settled for what was in front of him. Until one night, he heard something. Lying alone in his bed, he heard a whisper. Barely a sound, more like a thought. "What if you missed your true life?" it asked, as softly as a breeze. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but night after night, the whisper came back, a quiet voice in the dark, asking the same question. Jack couldn't shake it. He'd lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the voice, but it crept in like a shadow. One evening, he found himself lost in old photos, a collection of memories he hadn't looked at in years. Pictures from a time when he laughed easily, surrounded by friends, full of energy and dreams. There he was, smiling with an old friend he'd drifted from, another picture with a woman he'd loved but let slip away. And as he looked at those images, the voice returned, sharper this time. "This could have been your life, if only you'd made different choices." That night, when he finally drifted to sleep, he found himself in a strange place. At first, it seemed like a dream, a vision maybe. He saw himself, but he looked different, happier, confident. It was as if he were watching another man. Yet that man was him. In this other life, Jack was successful. He had close friends, a loving partner, and a home filled with laughter. It was everything he had once wanted. And there he was, living it. For a moment, he felt peace, a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. But as he reached out to touch this dream-like version of his life, the vision vanished, like smoke slipping through his fingers. He was awake again, back in his quiet, empty apartment, alone. But now, he couldn't shake the feeling that this other life was real, that somewhere, somehow, he had missed his true path. And each night the vision came back, clearer each time, drawing him in. He'd watch as the other Jack laughed with friends, celebrated birthdays, held the hand of a woman who looked at him with love. Every detail was vivid, beautiful, intoxicatingly perfect. Soon Jack found himself questioning his own choices. The vision had become an obsession, a torment. It was no longer just an image. It was a life he could feel, one that called to him with promises of joy and fulfillment. He stopped going out, ignored his friends, isolated himself in his apartment, fixated on the idea that he had missed his true destiny. One night, desperate to understand, he did something he couldn't explain. He stood before his bathroom mirror, staring into his own tired, searching eyes, and whispered, "Show me." The room darkened. His reflection faded, and he found himself pulled into darkness, then light. He opened his eyes, and he was somewhere else. This time it wasn't a vision, it was real. He was in a different apartment, one filled with warmth and light. He looked down and saw a photograph, him and the woman from his visions, laughing on a beach somewhere, happy, carefree. For the first time in years, Jack felt alive. He had everything he'd ever wanted, just like he'd seen. His heart raced as he explored this new life, each room filled with memories he didn't recognize, but somehow felt belonged to him. And in his heart, He felt home. Days turned into weeks, and Jack adapted to this life. He had friends who invited him to dinners, a job that he found fulfilling, and every night the woman he loved by his side. But something was off. He'd catch glimpses in the mirror of his old self, tired and lonely. It was as if his old life was trying to claw its way back into his mind. And sometimes he'd hear a faint echo, a whisper. This isn't right. He tried to ignore it, but the voice grew louder, a persistent reminder that wouldn't let him rest. One night, as he lay beside the woman he loved, he noticed something strange. Her face looked blurred, like a fading memory. And as he reached out to touch her hand, it was cold, ice cold. He pulled back, but she didn't react. She just stared, her eyes vacant, empty. Panicking, Jack began to question everything. He ran through his perfect life, searching for answers, but everywhere he looked, the world seemed to shift and warp, like a dream dissolving. He went back to the mirror and demanded, "What is this? Why is this happening?" And for the first time, he got an answer. The voice, that haunting whisper, laughed, a dark, mocking sound. "You wanted this, didn't you?" it sneered. "You thought you deserved more. You thought you'd been cheated. Well, here it is, the life you missed." Jack felt a chill run through him. This wasn't real. This wasn't his life. It was an illusion, a trap. And now he was caught in it, unable to return to the world he had left behind. Desperate, he began searching for an escape, but each time he tried to leave, the walls seemed to close in, trapping him, mocking him with glimpses of happiness that vanished when he reached out. He tried to remember his real life, his real apartment, but the memories were fading, slipping from his mind like sand through his fingers. One final night, as the last shreds of his old life dissolved into darkness, he heard the voice again. "You were given a life and you threw it away. Now, this is all you have." The voice grew louder, echoing through his mind, drowning out everything else. He screamed, begging for mercy, pleading to be set free. But there was only laughter. And so Jack's existence faded. His new life, once vivid and warm, became cold and empty, a hollow echo of happiness. He was a ghost in his own story, drifting through memories that weren't his, searching for a way out that would never come. He had wanted more. He had wanted a life he thought was his true path. But in the end, he had lost everything. Now, he was trapped in a shadow of his own making, bound forever to a life that wasn't real, haunted by the choices he could never undo. So I ask you, would you take that chance? Would you risk everything for the life you think you should have had? Or would you stay where you are, accepting what's real, knowing that sometimes the greatest mercy is in never knowing what could have been? Thank you for listening this far. The story of The Echoes of Forgotten Lives, a tale of a man named Jack. But Jack could be anyone. He could be you or me, or anyone who finds themselves lost in the shadows of dreams that might have been. Sometimes it's easy to get trapped in memories or regrets or those endless what-ifs. But remember, the life in front of you, the life you're living now, is the only one that's real. Don't lose it chasing after something that only lives in a mirror. So stay grounded, be in your own time, and live fully in the life that's yours, because in the end, that's what truly matters.